thank you for coming to this session. Really, as we talked about, this is about implementation, and we want to get your voice. The work you're going to do in this session will be taken back by the Alliance to guide our work moving forward. We will have a report that comes up out of this work, so we're really grateful for your voice. This is how we have driven this movement over the last 10 years and how we commit to driving this over the next 10 years. It's about collective impact, and we know that we live in a country where the system is federated, meaning there's a federal government, there's provinces and territories, and they have different ways of doing things. We've heard about that all yesterday from the federal government. We'd heard about it in the provincial territorial scan, the Now We report, the waitlist report, how different things are. And now we want to know from you, your knowledge base and your experience, how we can take that forward. What are the policy gaps? What are the issues? What are the solutions? And that we can able to feedback in the future, something you can take home and something we can use as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to introduce our head facilitator, Adrienne Lipsick, who co-founded Springboard to help bring good, diverse ideas to the table for better public policy. She leads projects to help organizations transform their knowledge and experience into clear public policy asks, develop complete strategies for systems change, or build their capacity to make change. As a former chief of staff to provincial ministers, she has experience steering landmark policy strategies across social and economic policy. So I'm going to turn over to you, Adrienne.
Thanks, Jonathan. Is this sound level good for everyone? Is everyone happy with this? Does everyone feel that they're at the table that they would like to be? And Adrienne Lipsick here for those who are visually impaired. Hello, the switch has been made. And here is the start of our session. So today we have 3.5 hours together, and I promise that most of it will not be me talking at you. But let me just zoom all the way out to what we are doing and why we have dedicated 3.5 hours of your conference to this session. So a National Autism Strategy has been long awaited, and it is coming. And it will be fabulous, good, bad, it will be something. And whatever it is, there is going to be a role for provinces and territories to intersect with that strategy and to really deliver for autistic people in Canada and the people who love and work with them. So we wanted to take that fact, the fact that the provincial and territorial part of this picture is coming into view, and spend some time on that. And we thought that it would be especially good to combine the folks who come to this leadership summit in different groupings across their regions, right? People who are in the same sort of area, same province, same territory, or same region, to work together, to do problem solving together, and to build a little miniature network so that they have that basis to draw from when it comes to working together to ask provincial and territorial governments for their contribution to changing how the system works or doesn't work, but it makes it work for autistic people in Canada. So from federal to provincial, that's why we're doing this. But this workshop is really about learning and practicing some of the skills that you're going to need in this sort of next era of the fight, this different focus of policy building. So we're going to go through some exercises. We're using words like learning and practicing and exercises because we're going to introduce some of the analytical steps that any coalition that wants to influence government will have to use, and we're going to put them into play today at your tables. But we're not expecting perfection or even your favorite conclusions from today. This is all about putting in reps to build strength as a community within your provinces and territories. So where do you start if you want to influence government? This little session is going to be an approach. We're going to provide you with one approach on how to work together to influence government at the provincial and territorial level. So what we want to understand today, we're going to do some level setting because we have people from every industry, every sector, every level of experience and comfort with public policies. So we're going to do some level setting about influencing policymaking. We're going to talk about what makes effective public policy solutions, and we're going to introduce those building blocks or those analytical steps that a coalition should work through in order to really have a plan to get action through public policy. And by doing this, we're going to have some skill building, some analytical skills, some articulation skills, some collaboration skills, and specifically, we're going to work on collective prioritization, all of which are going to be necessary for influencing public policy. How's it going to happen? A little bit of me presenting, a lot of you working together. It says on the slide, question and answer. That's actually an error, because we want to give all of the time to each of you at your groups, but when you are working in your groups, don't worry, I will be going through, walking around and troubleshooting to make sure we all are comfortable with the exercise. The plan for today welcomes an overview. We're almost done this section, fantastic. So then we're going to move on to introductions at your tables. I'd like to take a pause here and say hello to everyone in the room and also hello to everyone online. Folks online, you are going to have breakout groups of your own. They won't be necessarily arranged by region, but you will be doing the same exercise. The folks in the room right now are going to introduce each other to each other. Folks on Zoom, hi. We're actually just going to keep you in your large Zoom room to introduce each other to each other, either using the chat function or just sort of raising your hand and going around and saying hello. But you will later be going out into breakout rooms, our Zoom people. So introductions, I've already been introduced. I will just say the other hopefully useful piece of information is some of you we've met, because a whole pandemic ago in 2019, I was at this summit talking about the blueprint and talking about some of the strategies for doing all the way at the end of the process we're talking about here, how to really do a sales job to government on why an idea that's been articulated needs to be adopted by them. But hi, good to see you all. That was 2019, things have changed. We also have wonderful facilitators online and in person who have done lots of preparation, who's given up their time today, but also gave up time to be trained and to troubleshoot and improve this process. So thank you to all of you. Thank you sincerely very much. And of course, we have all of you. This is a wonderful collaborative process, and we're really appreciative that you want to work on this today. So that brings us to, let's meet each other. I'm going to be talking for a while. We thought, why don't you all talk to each other a little bit first? So we have some prompts, some questions. We'd like about 5 minutes, and I'm looking at our friends over to the side of the room. We'd like to take about 5 minutes for you all to meet each other at the table, and we have some suggestions for questions you could use as a guide. And those questions are, who are you? Where are you from? And what brought you here today? So we'll do a 5-minute countdown, if you please. Okay. Hello, hello, hello. I hate to break it up, but I promise that this session is all about talking together in these groups. So, hi everyone. Hello. I'm sorry. We do have some very large tables and some smaller tables, but I have a deal I can strike with you, which is that if you listen to me talk for about 30 minutes, you can talk to each other for the rest of the session, because that is how the session is designed. So I'm sorry if you didn't get to introduce yourself. Please hold that thought, and you'll be able to just restart briefly. So that kind of takes us to what the plan is here. So this is a workshop, and it's a workshop, as I say, people are coming to this workshop from different levels of understanding of public policy, different insights, different experiences. And so I'm going to do some level setting with you to talk about the concepts that we want to equip you with in order to have a shared understanding and a shared tool set to have this conversation. So that's me talking at you about public policy. And then we're going to spend a reasonable amount of time talking about the exercise itself. But if it's helpful to give you a frame for what we're going to do, so I'm going to talk and explain some concepts, and then you're going to be within your groups, and we're going to ask you to have 4 conversations, each one 25 minutes, each one at your group. And each one will be about a sort of different type of analysis, a different building block that you need to sort of pass, or that we're suggesting that you can pass through in order to have a clear ask to government, to a provincial and territorial government, for what you need from them to improve the lives of autistic people and to make the world more neutral, fair, and just for autistic people in your province and territory. So that's what we're going to do. So first, come with me, and we'll walk through some building blocks, some key concepts. Okay. The presentation. This presentation is titled Building Blocks to Influence Provincial and Territorial Public Policy. And we're going to go through each section one by one. So we're going to start at the end here with, what do we mean by public policy? Let's just set a level so that we all understand and are singing from the same songbook, all understand the same basic idea here. So what is public policy? There's a really lovely definition: is anything a government chooses to do or not to do. And which is it, right? It's essentially government action or government inaction is the public policy of that government. And the government expresses its choices using different tools, right? So I've got some examples here. Some of the choices that government makes would be expressed through law or regulation. So these are all from the example of driving a car. So the rules of the road are set by a government, in fact, a provincial or territorial government. Government can also make choices about the services that it offers directly to human beings. So Service Ontario can take your picture, administer a driving test, and give you a driver's license. That's a direct service that government provides. And that's an example of public policy. They can also structure grants and funding for service providers. And so many service providers in this room are largely, if not exclusively, funded through government because government recognizes that something needs to be done. I'm seeing faces here, inadequately funded through government, but government says something needs to be done. We're not going to do it through Service Ontario or any of our arms. We're going to create a funding stream that will be obnoxiously administered, and we're going to have our partners deliver this service. And that's a public policy decision choice as well. There are also taxes and incentives. So with our cars example, you get money off if you choose to buy an electric vehicle. That's a public policy choice that the government makes. And then there are redistributive benefits, which are essentially some folks have too much and other folks have not enough. And so government intervenes to try and create balancing. Doesn't actually work with the car example, but we can think about public transport having differential fares, right, or cheaper fares for certain groups of people like seniors or students or children, right? So these are just all examples of public policy. So what about provincial and territorial public policy? So we had a really great session this morning about some of the research that AAC and others are doing about finding gaps in public policies at the provincial and territorial level. So I don't need to go through this in too much detail, I hope. But, oh, excuse me, my friends at Face to Face, could I have the time of day clock down here, please? Thank you. Appreciate it. So the question is, what is provincial and territorial public policy? So we live in a federation, and this is either boring an old hat to you or boring a new hat to you, but we live in a federation, and some things are the federal government's job, and some things are the provincial government's job or territorial government's job, and some are in a sort of muddy middle in between. Many of the things that directly impact human beings, including human beings who are autistic, actually sit at the provincial and territorial level. So that would be healthcare, education, most social services. And then there are some where it's a split between the federal and provincial government, so housing, employment and skills, research. And then many tax policy decisions, though not all, because there are some, many are federal government, many, the CPP and RDSPs. These are all just examples. It's not a conclusive list here. So today, we're not talking about the federal government. You all have been talking about the federal government. You are working on getting the federal government to deliver a national autism strategy that works for you. That's just not this session. This session is focusing on those things that are within or partially within the provincial and territorial government's jurisdiction. I'm going to pause here and let you know that this little list, the starter list, is going to be with you when you do your workshop. That's going to be back on screen again, so you don't need to be trying to commit it to memory. So we can just move on along. So that's provincial, that's public policy, that's provincial and territorial public policy. What do we mean by influence? So very basically, influencing public policy means trying to get government to do better. And you can articulate that in different ways. Maybe government isn't taking action in an area where they're needed. Maybe they're taking action, but people are left outside of what is captured by that action. Not enough people qualify. Maybe people qualify for a program, but it just doesn't provide enough of what it's supposed to provide. Or maybe there's a program, people qualify, it provides what it provides amply, but it doesn't actually work, right? So these are just different ways of thinking about what might you want to change, right? So this is what it is. To influence public policy is to try to move from the left hand of the screen to the right hand of the screen. So then who influences public policy? So government mostly is the maker of public policy. So in our use case today, it's provincial and territorial government. Who can influence them? There are some days where we might be cynical and we say, oh, it's political donors who influence them, or you know, it's big corporate entities that influence them. But the truth is that governments are interested in good ideas from outside their own bounds, right? Now, and good ideas fall into a couple different categories. Good ideas can be information about something being wrong, right? Because a government is an entity and therefore is not experiencing services. So they need information from human beings when services, programs, and policies are wobbling and going off, right? But also in terms of designing solutions, there is a role for organizations and human beings outside of government. And this is a totally non-complete list, but these are all of you are probably represented somewhere amongst these little bubbles that you see on the screen that read things like civil society or sector organizations or leaders within a sector, individual people, researchers, people with lived experience. They can all contribute to government improving its policies. But how, you might ask? That sounds very lovely, but how would that actually happen? So there are different ways to look at it. One way that organizations and people outside of government can influence public policy is through proactive action, right? So campaigns is the label that we're using for this today, where you talk to the broader public and say, you're not aware, there is a problem here, right? People's attitudes about this need and this problem need to change. And by doing that, you create pressure on policymakers and they start taking it seriously, and then perhaps, this doesn't have to be linear, but then perhaps they open up their doors and say, hey, we actually do need to consult and better understand this issue. So that's then the next thing on this page here is consultations, right? So in campaigns, you're being proactive, saying, this isn't on the agenda, it needs to be on the agenda. The second is more reactive, where government has accepted that something needs to be on the agenda, and they're asking for advice. They're asking for advice through the portal through which they have decided to ask for advice, which can be a very wide open portal, or it can be a very narrow portal. And then the last way that you might influence government, and these are all just categories, is through collaboration, which is, it's essentially making yourselves known to be expert, constructive, and helpful. And that's not to the exclusion of the other things. You can be the type of person or organization that campaigns and that participates in consultations. But in collaboration, that's kind of the gold standard, where government actually picks up the phone and says, hey, we're thinking about this problem. Do you have input here? So those are the three categories of ways in which one might influence government. Now, I was going to talk about how do you know that you need to influence government? And honestly, folks, I think you know. I don't think you need a tool to hold up your circumstances and determine whether you want government action and whether this is the time for you to put yourselves together into a coalition to act. I think you know. I think you know. I mean, if you're interested, we've got some hints here, which is like the system is broken, there's a gap, and importantly, when government says what they're going to do next, it feels deeply inadequate, right? So if that is how you are feeling, what I put it to you that you need a plan for what comes next, because you don't want to be sitting in being disempowered and being frustrated. You want to take action. And so that kind of brings us to the forcing point here of this presentation and this workshop is, okay, so what's the plan? How would you build a plan to try and influence public policy? You need a plan in order to have collaboration and clarity, right? So collaboration, this is maybe obvious, but if you have a bunch of organizations who are unified in terms of their coordination and collaboration with each other, it is very hard for a government to ignore them, or harder than it is for them to ignore individual actors who are each saying different things and are sort of disconnected from each other. So a plan gives you, should furnish you with the ability to collaborate, and a plan should yield clarity, right? So you're all together, you're all linking arms, you're all saying, pay attention to our issue, and then government comes back and says, okay, well, what would you like us to do? If you have an appropriate plan, it should be yielding a clear answer to that question, clarity on what your ask is from government. So that brings us, you can see how we're going here, right? To the building blocks or the analytical steps that we encourage you to use to develop your plan. So the building blocks are types of analysis that are going to get you to clarity, and by walking through the building blocks, it's a collaborative process. So this is how we're going to do it together. And when I say we are going to do it together, I do mean that this is the basis of the workshop. We're going to walk through these steps together, but these aren't just workshop exercises. If you were to sit down, and this is my job, if I sit with an organization, they say, I want to influence public policy, I would work with them on some version of these 4 steps, right? So this is the real deal made small to fit in this room. Here they are, the building blocks, the 4 steps. You're going to get familiar with these over the course of the afternoon. The first thing you do is you take stock. And you take stock by asking a simple question, which is, what public policies are working and where are their gaps? And again, this is in the context of the provinces and territories. Now, you all know what the frustrations are. You all have a good picture, I think, of what is not working. So today, we would very much like to focus on, yes, airing what is not working, but instead of getting caught there, also talking about what assets you have in your province or territory that you can build from. If it's not zero across the board, what is there, and what can you learn from what's there in terms of what to build next? The next step is generating solutions. So given that we've taken stock, we understand the world of public policy as it affects autistic people in our province or territory, what's the whole world of solutions that could interact with that and improve it? So this is a step where you're just being very generative, no wrong answers, putting everything on the table, and it's an extremely inclusive step where anything that could be an answer to the deficiencies that you have in your public policy world is welcomed into this step. The next step is the hardest, which is prioritization. It is the hardest for everyone. It is the hardest, especially here, where the public policy areas that are implicated and that need to be improved for autistic people are very, very broad. It's hard because deciding together how to prioritize different solutions is extremely difficult for any group, but it's especially difficult for groups that have like very diverse interests, very diverse experiences. And it's also hard to know what your endpoint is. So you're prioritizing solutions. How many? What's your number that you think you can reasonably ask of government? What is your where do you want to put all your chips kind of thing? It's a hard step. We're going to try it today, and I want to zoom back out to what I said at the beginning, which is this is about learning and practicing and building strength more than it is about achieving a perfect outcome. So the process of trying to prioritize amongst yourselves will feel difficult, and to be honest with you, that is the point, because that is the lesson of this step in terms of what we want to gather from it today. Happily, we'll then go to a fourth step, which is refining solutions. And I've got a great little framework that you can apply. It's pretty linear, and it'll be sort of refreshing after that more difficult step. So that's refining solutions. So we've got some tips and tricks about how to take, zoom out, pick one of the things that you believe is priority, and pressure test it, challenge it, look at it from every angle, and determine how to make it something strong and saleable that government can say yes to, and that you can force government to say yes to in terms of a change that they need to make. Now here's the thing. Okay, good. There should be a gray box around circles 1 through 4. It's not clear on my screen. I'm hoping it's clearer on yours. Good, I'm happy to see that. So we're talking about steps 1 through 4 here. After 1 through 4, there is a 5th step, which is advocating for solutions. I'll use an analogy. I wonder if it's helpful. So 1 through 4 is you're developing your product, right? This is the thing that we want to put out into the world, that we want people to react to and to engage with. And then step 5 is selling it. It's going door to door, it's having an advertising campaign, it's very tactical, and that's where you would choose between, are we doing a campaign, are we tweeting at folks, or are we joining a consultation, or are we trying to get in and collaborate? That's where you make that decision, and that's where you choose, whether all of those tactical questions of your tone and your targets and all of those things. Important work, just not the focus of what we're doing today, because we really wanted to push to, what are you asking for though, right? So I'm gonna sip some water, and then we'll move into each of these things in just a little bit more detail. Okay, so 4 steps. First one is taking stock. We've got this lovely picture, a viewfinder. You're looking out into the world and seeing what is out there. So this is what is out there in terms of the public policy in your province or territory, or for those of you who are grouped by region, within your region, noting that it is different in each province they're in. So when you are taking stock, how do you actually do this? In this stage, you're going to ask, what is there? What are the services? What are the programs that impact autistic people and their communities? Where are their gaps and where are their strengths? Okay, so that's the most basic set of questions you can ask, and you can fill 25 minutes very easily just with this way of thinking about it. But you can also layer some more on it if you choose to, which is you can sort of look at the world of government services, programs, policy, and you can say, okay, well, to better understand and make sure we're mapping this world with the right level of detail, we can ask, well, then what are the policies that are specifically designed or attempting to have autistic people as the client, as the service recipient, right? Or as a person in mind for this policy? And are they doing a good job of that? And then you can also ask, are there policies that do not specifically contemplate autistic people, that because they are not specifically contemplating autistic people, are failing autistic people, right? These would be broader public policies that should be adapted to be appropriate, but just are not fit for purpose when it comes to autistic people. So that's one lens that you can impose here to try and say, if you try to map it out and you're thinking you're missing something, you can try to sort of come at it from this angle. The autism-specific policies and the broader policies. And then if you really want to, in this stage of analysis, you can look for patterns. right? So if we're asking you to say what's working, what's not working, when you have your pile of what's working, ooh, why are those ones working? What is similar across those public policies or those services? Who delivers them? Who designs them? So all optional, but always to really dig in at this stage. I'm going to sort of break the fourth wall even further here a bit and tell you about this slide. This slide is coming with you as you go on your journey into the workshops. There is a slide like this for each of these 4 questions. It's going to set you up nicely. It's going to ride with you when you're at your groups. And so it's just a summary. I'm not going to talk it through because what it should be doing is just summarizing. But sort of use this as success for when you're sitting at your table is going to look like describing at least some of the public policies, what's working, what's not. So what success looks like for that stage. Okay, next. Generating solutions. So the first one was maybe most familiar, you know, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. This one is a fun one. It's generating solutions. What could be better? Sorry, just to explain our little, what are all the tools one could use? See, that's what that picture is supposed to represent. Okay, generating solutions. So governments actually do need ideas for how to fix problems from outside. You, if you're going to form a coalition or even just be an individual person who wants to influence government, you have to look at the whole world of things you could ask for, totally neutral as to whether they're good or bad ideas, throw them on the table and understand the spectrum of what there is before you select things where you want to put your effort. There are some ways that you can think about it. You can ask what are the right, what would be a better way of thinking about the goals of a public policy? Can we do that? Or a really classic one is, oh, I've heard that they're actually really good at, I don't know if this is true, but they're really good at this one thing in BC, or they've really got it figured out in PEI, or as is classic in social policy, you know, the Nordic nations do this so well. I don't know if that's necessarily true in this case, but basically the big list. What could you do that's different, right? And then these are just more questions of trying to slice it, trying to come up with a big long list, which is the problem that government's doing too much, too little, the wrong thing? And so what's the opposite of that? What is it to do more? What is it to do less? What is it to do different? These are all ways that we can get to having the full world of possible solutions to the problems that you identified in the previous step. So again, this is not a slide that you need to take a lot of care with now, but it's going to ride along with you into the workshop. This is summarizing what we just talked about. Okay. This is the dreaded prioritizing solutions. I should maybe stop being rude about this step, but it is very hard, right? And why is it hard? Well, basically, we've given you an idea, like a bit of a scheme, a bit of a decision rule on how to prioritize, which is, okay, think about impact. But then you start thinking, okay, what does impact mean, right? That's sort of a blurry concept. And like, impact can be what policy will help the most people. But then you look at that question and you say, or that idea, and you say, is helping the most people correct, or is it helping some people the most? And they say, well, oh, I don't know. And then which people? So this is why this stage is difficult. There is no objective way to choose which public policies are going to be the most effective if created. There's no objective way to choose between public policy solutions, definitively. But unfortunately, just because it's not truly possible to do perfectly, doesn't mean you don't have to do it. So it is not possible to have an effective coalition or a really constructive conversation with government about what needs to change unless you can give them a list that they can tick off, a concrete set of things that they can do. And that set of things they can do simply cannot be the whole world of possible solutions, right? Some of them might be in tension with each other, but also it's just not possible to do every single possible thing. And this is hard because, to be explicit, in the other 3 steps, we are furnishing you with a particular analytical lens to apply to the stage. In this one, we are asking you this is kind of meta here, but we are asking you to work together to choose an analytical lens to apply, choose between different analytical lenses. And the exercise and the way that this makes you stronger within your region is by having that sort of contest between what you might prefer, and being able to have those conversations collaboratively, respectfully, et cetera. So you choose the lens and you do some prioritization. So then we have our lovely summary slide that rides with you into the workshop. The last one, as I said, refining solutions. It's my favorite one. You're going to pick one. In the case of this workshop, though not in the case of real public policy influencing, you're going to pick one. In fact, you're going to take anything that you want to be the subject of your advocacy, anything that you want to ask government to do, and you're going to put it through a crucible and challenge it and refine it and improve it and make it better. Today we're going to pick one, and it's going to take 25 minutes, and that still will not be enough time by a long shot, but it's going to be about building those reps and doing that exercise to get ready. So in prioritization, we asked you to come up with a framework that you can kind of agree on for now to pick some winners. So then you take one of your winners and you say, how do I make this ask of government very strong, very satisfiable, and very understandable to government? And you're going to want to challenge it. You're going to ask yourself, why hasn't government done this yet? And mostly there are no wrong answers, but for the purposes of this little step of this exercise, because they're mean is not a useful answer, or because they're bad, or because they're uncaring. That could be true. That absolutely could be true, but you need to also engage with the other things they would say about the reasons why they haven't done something yet. Why might government be resistant? But I promised you a particular framework, and here it is, so much more soothing than, hey, articulate different ways of deciding between things and then choose, but so much more soothing. You have a solution. I'd like for you to articulate it in a way, talk about it in a way that is very specific, that is very measurable, that is very understandable, and that is very practical. So specific. This person, actor, organization should do specifically this thing in exactly this way, and it should be done by this time, right? That is a very pointy ask that is hard for a government to wiggle away from, to not satisfy. And going to the next point, it is hard to have ambiguity about whether or not it has happened. So you want your ask to be measurable. Will you, as folks who are trying to influence policy, know whether or not the thing has happened? If you can't tell by the way that you're articulating it, you need to re-articulate it to be able to tell. The next one is it's got a bunch of different ideas in it, to be honest with you, is understandable from the perspective of government, right? Government needs to understand why it's in government's interests to do something. And so that has to do with, they would use terms like return on investment, or or they would consider things like, does this align with the political worldview of the government that's in place, right? How can you say this in a way that talks to government in terms of their priorities? And then finally, your ask ought to be practical, meaning from a decision maker's point of view. Obviously, there's nothing more practical than for the people in the room than changing a lot about how government treats and interacts with autistic people. It's practical because it's necessary. Put on your opposition hat and think about how to make it practical from the perspective of that where government is the opposition of that government. So can you say what it will cost? Like, is it a practical ask that they can chew on and understand? Have you acknowledged any downsides of doing this thing? And what is your strategy to mitigate, to sort of offset those downsides, to make those downsides matter less? Can you describe your ask in a way that makes it legitimately easy to do, or easier to do? And then, yes, responsive to opposition. What is the non-evil reason why someone would say no to this proposal? Think about that and try and account for it in how you articulate your ask. So policy asks, they can be big or small. They can say, make this one very important change to the tax code, for example. That would be a quote unquote small ask. That would be a huge change, but it would be one thing. Or you could have, for example, a blueprint that says, do all of these things, please. These are the suite of solutions that taken together are going to really push this issue forward. But ultimately, if you were going to try and influence public policy, what you want is for government to ask you, well, what do you want me to do? And you want to have a specific answer. So sorry, we didn't spend any time here, but as is the case with the other slides that look like this is a summary, and this is going with you into the workshop section, which is coming up soon. So in summary, in summary, you're going to have the opportunity to work through these things. The thing that I actually want to bring you to on this slide is that little ribbon that says, I don't know is a reasonable and useful response. I'm going to say this a couple times. That is actually a golden response. If you are at the starting line running a race and you're going to try and get to the end point of, let's see if I can extend this metaphor, and you're trying to get to the end point where you are influencing government, you need to know if you only have one shoe on, right? Like, that's important. You need to know what you don't know. You need to know if you have no idea what you're suggesting would cost, like no idea at all. If that's the case, okay, great, because you can find that out and then you can come back stronger. So I don't know is a fantastic, valuable answer in this analysis and in this exercise today. So that's the presentation part. Now we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna just take a little bit of a pause, change the energy into, we're about to do a workshop. What's it gonna be like? How are we gonna do it? So, facilitated exercise. You all have workbooks in front of you, and your facilitators have workbooks too, hard copy or on their computers. Those workbooks tie in exactly to what we just talked about, and they're gonna be your structure and your lifeline for this exercise. Your facilitator has been trained on this, and they're gonna talk you through it, but essentially what we want you to do is have good, productive conversations at your tables. We want everyone, and this room will do this, of course, but everyone to be respectful and understanding that everyone comes from a different starting position. Some people have PhDs in things related to public policy. Some people maybe took civics in grade 10. That's all valuable because everyone's input in this room matters and is important and effective. To break it down, each of the 4 steps is 25 minutes. At sort of reaching the 7 minutes left mark, and you're gonna have a timer on the screen, at the 7 minutes left mark, your facilitators are gonna try to be explicitly steering you into summarizing what you might think. Now, it's gonna be hard, and it's very important to note that this is about the process and not about perfect words on the page. And this is, some people will find this graphic helpful, some people might not. So you start with gaps, strengths, etc. Then you have a large set of solutions, and they fit into the gaps, and they sort of build on what's there. And then you pick, ideally, a number. I've got 3 here. 3 to 5, I think, is in your workbooks. The magic is in those squiggly arrows. They hide a lot there, right? It says, like, and then you just magically choose 3 of them. But basically, you're talking about what's existent, then you're talking about what there should be, big number, and then you're going through a process to choose a small number. Okay, and then at the very end, you're just working with one. Just one solution left at the end as the thing that you're really taking your tools, your knife and fork or your hammer and sickle or whatever, to at your table. To say this again, the secret special insight that can come out of this process is where you do not have the information to feel like you're doing your best answer. Right? That is a very valuable insight. That is something to write down. That is something to add into your summary because it really highlights something that should be in essentially your work plan. This is about learning. This is about practicing. The slide you already saw, but we're putting it up again to say, remember, this is about learning, practicing, building strength, not being perfect. And the process is what we're focusing on. And this is not creating official recommendations. And this is not, you come out of this table, obviously, with an action plan ready to go. Process, journey, etc. So that puts us at the time where I would like for us to go into our workshop groups, which are the tables that you're sitting at. Before I do that, does everyone feel like, great, I should stop talking and you can just get into it? Or are there questions, thoughts?
Can we not have a timer that stresses people out up there?
We don't want a timer on the screen? Yeah, sure, we can not have a timer. I see my folks over there. Great, we shall have no timer, but when there are 7 minutes remaining, or I'm hearing mixed opinion. Anyway, we've had a request to not have a timer. We shall not have a timer. But when there are 7 minutes remaining, I am going to come up here and say 7 minutes remaining. Okay? 25 minutes remaining, folks. I'll be walking around for any questions. Hello. That was 25 minutes, believe it or not. That was it. Great, thank you. I'm seeing thumbs up. Time, great. Hi, folks. Hi. Hello. Thank you. So you can see why I keep saying that the purpose is not to have a complete product, but to have the experience of going through the process, because we have 3.5 hours for this workshop, but divide it down, it's just not enough time to finish. But that's okay, that's kind of the point. It's to give you the practice and get you started. We had a very helpful intervention, which is a reminder that I should be setting the table with these concepts again before we go into our breakout groups. So I will do that. So we just did step one. Step one, as you know, checking for what the gaps are in public policy in your provinces or territories. The next step here is all about, given what there is in terms of public policy in the provinces and territories, what should there be instead? The whole world of solutions, this is where we say, put everything on the table, really and truly no wrong answers. What are the solutions, public policy solutions that are possible in your province and territory, given what you were just talking about? So success at the end of these 25 minutes will be coming up with a big inclusive list of things that provincial and territorial governments can do, and it's just say can do differently, can do better, can do next. Sound good? Yeah, a big list. We'll cut it down in a minute. Okay. And then after this, importantly, coffee break. Hi. Hello. Thank you. So folks, it is time for a coffee break. So it's 3:20. Let's reconvene here at 3:50. I will say, if you are in the middle of something and you don't want to stop talking, go for it. But we are all going to sort of resettle here at 3:50 to get into the second half of this workshop. I'll be floating around. If you have comments, questions, corrections, advice, etc., very happy to hear any input as we go into the second half of this workshop. Thanks.